Okay, I'm here again. Here's Anita Finley. I just did some other Zoomer Times, but I have a very special guest. And this is the Zoomer Times TV. And if you haven't heard of Dr. Jeffrey Gurian, you will have definitely know him when we get finished. So Jeffrey, I can't imagine what you were like as a little boy, because you still have all that boyish stuff with you now. You never let it go, did you?
Never. My inner child is my best friend.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I really believe in my home, it's filled with balloons and crayons and toys. And you know what? I do it for me. People come over and they're amazed. They say it's like a kindergarten area, because I firmly believe that it's very important to stay connected to that inner child. That's in all of us, not just me, but I'm willing to be open to it. When you were a little girl and your friends would come over and say, "Can Anita come out to play?" and you were so excited, that's not supposed to stop just because you grow up and you do serious things. You know, you're supposed to stay connected to that, and that's what keeps you young, and it keeps your immune system working well.
So Jeffrey, what is the Happiness Center all about?
Well, the Happiness Center was a healing center that I had back in 1999. You know, the other part of my life besides comedy, I was a cosmetic dentist for many years, and I was a professor at NYU in oral medicine and orofacial pain. And my specialty was taking away the physical symptoms of stress, very often tied in with clenching and grinding the teeth, which is called bruxism, that causes things like migraine headaches and neck pain and facial pain and ringing in the ears, many different symptoms that people don't often associate with their teeth. And in 1999, I approached a group called the Association of Spirituality and Psychotherapy. And they were all classically trained psychotherapists except for me. And I explained my work to them because I said, when you're treating people who are depressed or have any kind of emotional illness, there's a very good chance that they're clenching and grinding their teeth from stress, and that they have physical symptoms that are not being treated. And you can't get a person better. You can't treat depression and emotional illness without using a body, mind, spirit approach. It's not enough to just give somebody pills or to just see a psychiatrist. You have to get to the root cause of what it is that's bothering them, because too many people are living in the past saying what I could have done and what I should have done when I was younger, and they're lost in that, and they're worrying about the future. They're engulfed in fear, and they're losing the now. They're not appreciating the moment that they're in, which means our reality right now, Anita, is that you and I are talking. That's all. That's our lives right now at this moment, and I'm very present for that. So I opened a healing center. I went to a physician who was very well known on 57th Street in Manhattan, and I presented my idea to him, and he loved it. And I called it the Happiness Center. And I worked on my patients and his patients. He would send patients to me who were experiencing problems with thought. They were living in a negative world. And when you're living in a negative world, you view everything through a negative screen. You know, you take information in and you turn it around so that it always works against you. Those are the people that always say, well, with my luck, this will happen. You know, nothing ever works out for me. It works out for other people, but not for me. And the spiritual outlook on that is that if something doesn't work out for you, it's not because you're being punished. It's because you're supposed to have something better than that. And if you got the thing you wanted, you wouldn't be available for the really good thing that's coming to you. So I had this healing center, and I had it there for a while. And what it is, it's energy work. When I was at NYU, they saw me taking away headaches from people, just using my hands, no injections, no drugs, just using energy. And a very simple example is, for your audience, I'm sure they've all experienced it. If you've ever been upset in any way and someone that you cared about gave you a hug and you feel better afterwards, it's because you allowed them to transfer positive energy to you and you were open to receiving it. Right? A hug is the most simple form of energy transfer, which is why in many spiritual groups, people are always hugging each other because it grounds you. So you know, I've been through a heart attack. I had COVID double pneumonia back in March. I was in the hospital, and I learned the power of kindness, you know, which is very, very important. It's not just about hugging and stuff like that. It's things that you say to people. When the ambulance crew came to get me at my house, I was sick for 2 weeks before I had to call an ambulance. And when they came to get me, they were dressed in hazmat suits and double masks. And one of the men took my hand and he said to me, "Don't worry, you're going to be okay." I can't tell you the power of that, how important that was. That act of kindness, that simple act, meant so much to me, because my feeling is that when you're that sick, and I was very, very sick, they diagnosed me with COVID double pneumonia. And I was in a very high risk category because of my heart condition. So I was really afraid to call an ambulance, because this was at the height of the epidemic in New York City. You know, we were the epicenter for quite a while, back in March when it first started here. And I was really very nervous to call. But when they took me and he said to me, "Don't worry, you're going to be okay," that started me on feeling that I could survive this thing, you know? And when I got to the hospital, they put me, well, first I was in isolation. I was in the emergency room first, of course. And they put me next to a woman who was screaming, literally screaming with every exhalation. And I had to take control of my mind, which is a lot about what I write about learning to examine your thoughts and to control your thoughts. And instead of feeling sorry for myself, I had to step outside of myself and realize how much pain this woman must be in, or how scared she must be to be screaming with every breath. Because my first inclination was, why do they have to put me next to a screaming woman? I'm so sick as it is. My blood pressure, you know, normal blood pressure is 120/80, right? My 80 had dropped to 42. So my circulatory system was collapsing. They even found it hard to get a vein to start an IV with me. And they needed to bring down my fever. And I knew I was sick, but I didn't think I had double pneumonia. And they put me in isolation for 2 days. And then they put me in a room with 3 other very sick men, all with the virus. And I don't know if they were kidding or not, but the man next to me, they told me he was from Wuhan, of all places. Talk about luck, right?
Right.
He couldn't speak English either. He was an elderly Chinese man, and I had to call the nurse on his behalf, because I literally thought he was dying. I never heard anybody choking like that. And he was coughing into the air with no mask, and I'm laying right next to him. So I had to constantly control my thoughts, because when you're in a negative frame of mind, your immune system drops. It's very hard to fight off disease, very hard to fight off infection. And I knew that, and I knew I had to stay positive. And so I was getting a lot of support from the comedy community, which is the other part of my life. You know, I'm one of the only doctors who has a very long-standing career in the comedy world. And they announced on Sirius XM radio that I was in the hospital. And I started getting literally hundreds and hundreds of messages from people. I was too sick to answer anybody, but just knowing that all those people were thinking of me really helped me to pull through, because I'm a big believer in the power of prayer and the power of thought. And when so many people are focusing their energy on one thing, I really believe that it has an effect. And it certainly helped me, I have to tell you, because I was joking as much as I could. I was joking when I had a heart attack. I was on the operating table and they were putting a stent in my heart. I had what they call a widowmaker heart attack. And I wasn't completely asleep. They put you in like a twilight sleep. And I said to the surgeon, "I feel you in my heart," not in a romantic way, but I feel you in my heart. And he said, "I'll give you more anesthetic." And that's the last thing I remember. Until he came to my room later that day and he hugged me and he said, "I want you to know that you're a miracle." And I said, "Well, you're the miracle. You're the guy that saved me." You know? So I was back on stage performing 5 days later. And the owner of the comedy club said to me, "What are you, crazy? You just had a heart attack." And I said, yeah, but it's hard to get a spot here. I don't want to lose my spot.
You know, Jeffrey, this is such a thrill. I mean, I know I got an email from you, and I did not know you until this time, but I have done research, and I just have one big smile on my face. I can hardly contain myself with not only all of the things that who you are, but what you do for people, and it's just beautiful to find someone like you. There aren't a lot of people at the moment, especially during this pandemic we're having and all, but you express yourself so well. You're very talented, but I do want to go into a little bit about your writing the books, because you've had more than these. I think it said 7.
I have 7 books. The first 5 books were comedy oriented. They were books, you know, there's a famous comedy club in New York called the Comic Strip. It's where Jerry Seinfeld started, and Eddie Murphy and Chris Rock and Ray Romano. So the owner is my partner. That's one of my home clubs. And I wrote the book about the history of the comic strip. Chris Rock wrote the introduction. And I interviewed Billy Crystal and Jerry Seinfeld and Jim Gaffigan and every big star that came out of the club. They're all friends of mine, and they sat down and I interviewed them for the book. So my first 5 books were all about comedy. But then I decided that I've been through so many things in my life, and I've had to overcome so many obstacles. My biggest obstacle, I think, was when I conquered stuttering. I was a very severe stutterer through my 20s and beyond. And I stuttered so badly that I couldn't even say my name. I could never say Gurian. Most stutterers have a very hard time saying their name, because my feeling is that your name is your identity. It's who you are. And if you're not happy with who you are, then it's very hard to tell other people who you are. You tend to block on that. So my parents had sent me for speech therapy, and no one was able to help me. And I realized one day that I didn't stutter when I was alone. I only stuttered when I was trying to talk to somebody else, which told me that you can't have a disability based on your location, right? If a man has a limp, he limps in every room of his house.
Yes.
He can't go into a room and close the door and walk perfectly. But if I could speak fine when I was alone, then it means that theoretically there's nothing wrong with me, that it's something I created in my mind. And I worked on myself for many years until, as you can see, I no longer stutter. And as an avocation, I work with stutterers all over the world, and I teach them my technique of how not to stutter. It's about thought. It's about that all of us are holding thoughts that are not valid for us. And many of those thoughts are negative, and they were given to us by people who didn't have our best interests at heart. It could have been your parents when you were growing up that told you that you'll never amount to anything. You could have been bullied. It could be from a relationship where someone broke up with you and said nasty things to you. And that led to my first book. I decided to write books about happiness, about how to teach people how to think differently to achieve happiness. So my first book that became a bestseller on Amazon, it's called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness. And it's got a meditating dog on the cover.
I was going to ask you about that. What, is that your dog, or that was just symbolic?
Dog is a very powerful image. It's God spelled backwards, is dog.
You're right.
And people tend to be very drawn to dogs. They love dogs. Dogs give you unconditional love. I'm actually in the process of looking for a dog.
I have one sitting right here by my and listening to me when you.
How wonderful that is. So I wanted to create a cover that would draw people to it.
Yeah.
And I got reviews from doctors, from psychiatrists, from MDs. I only used one comedian, Richard Lewis from Curb Your Enthusiasm, because he's such a good friend. And I wrote this book about healing your heart by changing your mind, which is not about my heart attack. It's about letting go of what I call heart wounds, all the pains that we accumulate growing up through our lives. A lot of painful things happen to us. Most of them we never expected. And we hold on to them. And they stay lodged in our heart chakra. And I call them heart wounds. And they affect your self-esteem, they affect your self-confidence, and they affect every decision that you make. Because every time you're called upon to make a decision, you think about what to do. Who else's thoughts can you use but your own, right? You think about what to do, but very often our decisions don't work for us because our thoughts are faulty. And it takes a lot of work to objectively look at your thoughts and see what thoughts you're holding. But a lot of our thoughts are negative about ourselves. We tell ourselves we're not enough. We're too old to do this. We're too heavy to do this. We don't look right. We don't have the right training. And we hold ourselves back. We self-sabotage. So I wanted to write a book to teach people how to let go. There's a lot in there about my story about how I stopped stuttering and how I had to change my mindset from negative to positive.
That was my next question. Did you write a book about stuttering, but you put that in there? That's great. Okay.
You know what? It's not just about stuttering. It's about overcoming obstacles in your life. It's about learning to think a different way. I use stuttering as an example because it's really hard to stop stuttering. It's not an easy thing. And now I use my voice in everything I do. I lecture all the time, and I'm on stage or I'm on the radio, and I'm always listening to my voice, and I'm grateful every single day that I don't stutter. I never forget it, because gratitude and service are two of the most important things that we can do in this life. I feel that we're given obstacles to overcome so that we can help other people. Because when I approached the Association for Spirituality and Psychotherapy, I told them that when I work with patients who are depressed, as a dentist, you're very close to being a psychiatrist when you're a dentist. People are very afraid to go to the dentist. And if you can make people calm, that's a very big thing. And, you know, I would always tell them about my own life, about things that I experienced. Psychiatrists very often don't say anything about themselves. They remain quiet. They just let you talk. They don't touch even.
But Jeffrey, let me ask you a question. I was told that there's a very high percentage of suicide with dentists. Why would that be?
There is, and there's also a very high percentage of divorce. I did the divorce. I'm trying to put off the suicide. No, you know why? Because very often dentists don't do anything else besides that, and you spend your whole life working on people who are afraid to come to you, and you're working in a very small area. You know, inside the mouth is a very limited area, and teeth are very tiny when you come to think of it, and you're working inside of that tooth. So your whole life is working in a very, very small area, and you're very alone. Most dentists work by themselves. It's a very solo kind of career. As is comedy. In comedy, you're also working by yourself. I'm very used to being alone, in a sense. My kids are grown up. I live alone. And so, you know, I have that other perspective because I balanced it with comedy. I have that whole other life. Most dentists don't. They live in that world. And when you're constantly surrounded by people who are afraid of you, you're always trying to calm people down. It really wears you down over the years. And a lot of dentists get very depressed because they don't do anything else.
Thank you. You explained that. I have always wondered about that. But let me move forward with a few things. So you have created a lot of things for the good of humanity.
I try.
And now you're I have to assume you're in your 60s, and you have at least, I wrote a book called Live to Be 100 Plus. So based on that, you've got 40 years. What in the world will you be able to do now? Go to the moon, go somewhere it's like you've created everything.
You know, it's very interesting. My life, like, I look at my life almost as an observer. You know, I watch it happening, and I'm wondering what will happen next, because things occur. Like, I went to dental school in Philadelphia, and I had a terrible time. I was bullied and harassed in a way that you would never expect.
Is that because of stuttering? Why were you?
No, I was still stuttering at the time. The dean of the dental school now told me that the instructors in those days were racist and anti-Semites.
Oh, I see.
And I was singled out, and I was harassed from day one. I was banned from school. Yesterday, well, this is really a truly amazing story. The dean of the same dental school now contacted me in January and asked if he could meet with me. And I had no idea why. Out of a clear blue sky, his secretary wrote to me and said, the dean would like to come to New York and meet with you. He's in Philadelphia. So I said, you mean with a whole group? And she said, no, just you. and I couldn't figure out why. I assumed that they were going to ask me for a donation because they treated me so poorly in school that I left Philadelphia and never went back. I never had anything to do with them because I was really damaged. They told me that I was a disgrace to the profession.
Oh, I'm so upset.
And that I would never be successful. And here I'm a 22-year-old guy, and the instructors singled me out. Because I grew a mustache and sideburns, I was banned from school. I was not allowed to see patients for 3 weeks, and they wanted me to drop out. And my parents said, we understand, if you want to drop out, we'll support that decision. And I said, I'll never let them get the best of me. One guy had a Confederate flag in his office and a sign that said, the South will rise again. And he's the one who tortured me psychologically, he and his partner. So this dean, because I've learned that I have to confront my fears, which is why I wrote this new book, Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way. Yes. I agreed to meet with him. And he brought a second dean with him, and they took me to a beautiful restaurant. And I thought to myself, this is an opportunity for me to tell him my story of how poorly I was treated. And as soon as I started telling him the story, before I even mentioned the instructors' names, he stopped me and he said to me they were racist and anti-Semites. And I said, thank you for saying that, because I've carried that with me all these years. And he invited me to come to the school to address the students and tell him my story. He said, we've changed the whole culture of the school. Everything is different now. Then the pandemic hit. So I wasn't able to go, but last night was the first night I started a lecture series for them. He invited me to do a lecture series to the students and the alumni about how to change your mindset from frustrating to enjoyable and from hate to love. I never would expect that in my life. You talk about beyond your wildest dreams. This is 40 years later, and I have that kind of closure. And the dean just created a whole different kind of culture.
And you're going to do this on Zoom?
On Zoom. For the next 4 weeks, I'm lecturing to the students and the faculty about my techniques of how to change a thought. And I told them the story of how poorly I was treated.
Yes.
And which is an amazing thing. I would think that they wouldn't want people to know. But the dean said to me that those guys ruined the reputation of the school because it went on for so long. And he had looked me up on the internet. Somebody told him about me. And he did me the honor. They came to New York just to meet me, which was amazing. So
Jeffrey, I have to ask you a question. Are those people still living? The professors?
I looked them
up.
All
done?
They're all dead.
Gone.
They're all
Too
dead.
Bad. That'd be nice to have them apologize to you.
Yeah, I think of that often. But that's why I wrote about heart wounds, because those things stay with you. When we grow up, they tell you this silly thing, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never harm you, which is the furthest from the truth. Because all the bruises you got as a kid healed up a long time ago. But every one of us can remember something that someone said that hurt our feelings. And these guys, they tried to destroy me as a human being. And it took me a long time to get up the courage. I didn't think that I would be successful, and I wound up with a very big practice. And when I first got out of school, I worked Medicaid. I worked in very poor neighborhoods, and I treated the people like gold, the way they should be treated. And when I went into my own practice, those poor people on welfare, they were willing to pay to come to my new practice. They wanted to come and stay with me.
I can understand it. I can understand it, Jeffrey. I mean, I'm so proud, pleased that you contacted me and that we now have some sort of relationship, because you are rare. You're a rare bird, as I call it. But I just have to applaud you, because with all your success, you're still that kid that appreciates every moment. And you share things so well. You're so articulate. And do you still do comedy?
Well, I haven't, because all the comedy clubs are closed. So I haven't been on stage since last March. But I'm doing a big show next month, the Guinness Book of Records. This fellow contacted me. He's doing the longest variety show on record, 60 hours. and he asked if I would be one of the MCs to MC for an hour at a time. And I said, of course, I'll do that because performing on a computer is very difficult to get people to laugh when you can't really see them. It's a very odd thing. So I'm going to wait till the clubs come back until I go out there again. But I want to say why I contacted you. First, I was very impressed with your interviews and impressed with you as a person because you understand what I'm doing. I can see that it resonates with you. You have that great smile and you're open. And that's why I felt drawn to write to you, because I got an email about you and I don't know where it came from, but I'm a very big believer that the universe puts things in your path that you're supposed to be aware of. And once you live that way, you don't overlook opportunities. So I wrote to you, and that's how this came about. And I thought, it's fantastic.
And my heart is beating so fast. It's funny, my dog's lying down. My heart's beating so fast. I have a big smile, and I'm never going to be the same because of you. You really are special. And the thing I like so much about you is that you're not finished. You're just doing everything you possibly can be.
Yeah, I'm just starting. I'm never finished. I always have plans for other things. You know, new comedians like Nick Kroll and John Mulaney, they had me open their Broadway show for them. These guys are at the top of comedy. Colin Jost, who just married Scarlett Johansson, is a good friend of mine. He gave me a blurb for my book, you know, and I just want to say, so when I got out of the hospital with COVID, double pneumonia, I was so grateful. And I understood what fear is about. And that's why I wrote this book, Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way. And it turned into a #1 release on Amazon in several categories.
Today, because there are so many books out there that would happen. And I wanted to, though, move along with something and ask you, so you have children?
I do. I have 5 grandchildren. I'm blessed with that.
And how do you respond with them? How do they respond to you? How is all that working?
You know, I never know. I see them all the time. We're very close. My oldest daughter is a nutritionist. She's the head of nutrition at the Scarsdale Medical Center. And my younger daughter is an ultrasound technician at a big hospital in Connecticut. They're both in the healthcare field. But my oldest daughter now is working on creating an online course, and I'm helping her write the content. So it's very interesting that I could help her that way. She just this morning, she wrote, "Dad, you're a great writer." And it meant so much to me because they're both very accomplished, and I don't get a lot of compliments from them. I never know what they really think of me. They always say, "Dad, I love you." But, you know, people say that all the time. So it gives me a lot of joy to be able to do something that can help them in some way. And if I can do that, I mean, it's fantastic.
Of course. So the big question is, you have all this magic, and here you were married and you got divorced, and you couldn't help that. I mean, there's so many things we can all do, but sometimes it's not right, I guess. Is that
right? I'll tell you something special about that. Because I'm close to my ex-wife. We celebrate all holidays together with me and her husband and their extended family. She adopted 2 more children, and she had one of her own. And those 2 children needed to be adopted, and that little girl needed to be born. And that couldn't have happened had we stayed together. So those are the kind of things that you can only see in retrospect. But we didn't have a nasty breakup. It was just a thing. Our lives went in different directions. It was probably the most painful thing that I ever had to go through. It's a horrible thing and nothing that anybody ever wants. But for the sake of the children, we never said a bad thing about each other. And it wound up by using those principles, by incorporating those principles into our lives, we stayed connected all these years. So I see them all the time. We have dinners. We have holiday dinners at my old house, the house I used to own, where she lives with her husband and the kids, and it's all good. It's all fun.
Lovely. So now tell me a little bit about your parents, because I always believe if you look at a person, you can tell a little bit about their parents. So, and do you have siblings?
I have one sister who lives in Florida, and my parents were wonderful. They were absolutely amazing. They they both had great sense of humor, especially my dad. My dad was the one who turned me on to comedy. When I was a little kid, he would take me to see the Marx Brothers and Laurel and Hardy and Abbott and Costello, and he loved to laugh, and he'd make up words all the time, and he was just a great guy. He was a liquor salesman, and he wanted to be a doctor, but he grew up without a dad, and they never had enough money for him to go to medical school. So he lived through me vicariously. And my mom, her father owned a nightclub, a very big nightclub in the Bronx in the 40s. And Milton Berle was my sponsor in the Friars Club. I know you know Milton Berle, but a lot of young guys these days may not know Milton Berle. He was my sponsor. So I got to work with all the greats from the Golden Age. You know, Sid Caesar and Henny Youngman, and I knew them, Red Buttons, I knew them all. You know, I got to work with them because I wrote for the Friars Roast for many years. So my grandfather owned a nightclub, and my mother was very much a show business person. So I think that's where I got the bug, because when we were growing up, all of our family were at the nightclub.
Right, so I've just been told we had 2 minutes and we're just about finished, but let me just say that, and ask you, so they were alive when you were having a good life, that they could enjoy.
Yes, absolutely, yes. They were here. They knew everything that I did, and I think they still do. I feel like they're watching over me, for sure.
You know, Jeffrey, this is, I'm out of my body right now, which is interesting.
Very kind.
So I'll talk to you again. Hopefully you'll come down and visit your sister, so I'll get to meet you.
I hope so. If you don't mind, I'd like to give my website so people will know.
Yes, please do that. Absolutely.
So my website is comedymatterstv.com. And I even have a YouTube channel that has a couple of million views with interviews with Jimmy Fallon and everybody in comedy that you would love. They're all on there. It's youtube.com/comedymatterstv. And Amazon just put my new book on sale. They did it on their own because they want more people to read it. And this time when we're all surrounded by fear and insecurity, I hope you'll check it out.
Yes.
It's half price on Amazon. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. It was beautiful, and I'm sure we'll talk again.
I hope so. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes. Goodbye. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
So, bye.